This paper is also part of this series and talks about how actually green preferences sustain greenwashing and what are the challenges in the cultural transition to a sustainable future as opposed to just green preferences ignoring greenwashing. Greenwashing is basically like whitewashing, where, let's say, companies, towns, governments, politicians, whoever are portraying themselves as doing things that are environmentally friendly, recyclable things that are not really recyclable, and not being careful about the actual environmental impact and so on. So, what is the abstract discussions of the environmental impact that revolve around monetary incentives and other easy to measure factors are important, but they neglect culture. So environmental values will be crucial when facing sustainability challenges in the Anthropocene. Well, we're already facing them. And these demand among green consumers, and the demand among green consumers is arguably critical to incentivize sustainable production. So we're talking about corporations and industries responding to demands from the public or the consumer. However, owing to asymmetric information, consumers might not know whether the premium they pay for green production is well spent. We all love to look at the labels, and if it has that triangular recycle thing, we just believe, take it at face value that it is recyclable, or if it says green, that it's environmentally friendly, and so on. But we don't have all the information. The manufacturer keeps all the information and shows you something. Reliable monitoring of manufacturers is meant to solve this problem. To see how this might work, we developed and analyzed a game theoretic model of a simple buyer-seller exchange with asymmetric information, and our analysis shows that greenwashing can exist exactly because reliable monitoring coexists with unreliable monitoring. So you have some parts that are reliably monitored, and some hidden details are not really monitored accurately or reliably. More broadly, promoting pro environmental values among consumers might even amplify the problem at times because a manufacturer with significant marketing power and market power can explain both consumer preferences for sustainability and trustworthy monitoring to gouge prices and, in extreme cases, greenwash in plain sight. We discussed several strategies to address this problem, promoting accurate beliefs and a large-scale behavioral change based on pro-environmental values might be necessary for a rapid transition to a sustainable future. But recent evidence from the cultural evolution literature highlights many important challenges. This article is, of course, part of the theme issue, Evolution and Sustainability, Gathering the Strands for an Anthropocene Synthesis. So this is the seventh podcast, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, eighth podcast. Okay, so I forgot. Okay, so just I will again be brief and make a few points and show one figure about the nice complex game theoretic model that puts in this idea that information is not symmetric between manufacturer and the consumer. These always come with recommendations, which I'm not necessarily going to read too much because my main point is to expose you to these evolutionary traits and the cultural transitions, ET2 that we called before, that are needed for sustainability transition, and whether our evolutionary traits are a barrier or a facilitator for this transition, right? Are we capable? A few years ago, one of us happened to be in the room, one of the authors, when a member of staff at a large international firm based in Switzerland gave a presentation. The grand theme of the presentation was sustainability, and Switzerland is among the most progressive countries on this. In practical terms, however, the presentation centered largely around certification programs designed to identify goods that have been sustainably produced. After some introductory remarks about changing consumer preferences for socially and environmentally responsible production and the need for firms to respond, the real star of the presentation appeared. Specifically, the firm in question, like many others, had recently introduced its own in-house certification program, a kind of proprietary imprimatur to signal that the consumer could buy the firm's self-certified products in good conscience. Well, that's the problem already. Self-certification, the staff member giving the presentation offered in-house certification as a great innovation, a win-win mechanism for everyone up and down the supply chain, from primary manufacturers to end consumers. Such she largely ignored the obvious counter-argument, namely, in-house certification faces a credibility problem. It allows the firm to obscure the criteria for certification, and it allows the firm to obscure the protocols for verifying that manufacturers have actually met the criteria in place, whatever they may be. In-house certification, in short, is vulnerable to greenwashing. Greenwashing may undermine the meaning of certification for the end consumer and, by extension, call into question the value of in-house certification for the firm. If you are a Swiss person, Swiss citizen, you may believe your corporation's so greatly, so deeply that you will say, yes, this is a good company and I believe their self certification. And they may be doing a good job, but obviously credibility can easily be called to question. That said, how exactly do incentives work when consumers face a suite of certification schemes, some of which are relatively credible and some of which are not? A number of recent papers have highlighted the possibility that a sustainable future will require the kind of large-scale behavioral change that follows when social norms change. And there are many examples given in these references. One version of this argument is that consumer populations undergo a cultural evolutionary process that causes sustainability preferences to spread. After this has happened, consumers can exert pressure up the supply chains via their purchasing power and in turn force firms to respond. And many of these things are in play in terms of protesting investments in fossil fuel companies by universities and so on. And it does lead to some action where universities say they are divesting from oil companies. But they have many, when you have 50 billions of endowment, you have investments all over the place. So can you track all of the corporations for their greenwashing or sustainability? Nearly impossible. Fossil fuel companies are easy targets, but everybody is in this game now. So applied cultural evolution modeling is done with a game theoretic approach. An interesting concept discussed in the cultural evolution literature is that a benevolent social planner can recruit endogenous evolutionary mechanisms to initiate cultural change for good. While regulations and economic incentives are certainly important mechanisms to address the issue of greenwashing, a social planner could try to intervene in the cultural evolution of behaviors related to sustainability. So you incentivize behavioral changes. Our model accounts for two individual characteristics that might be relevant in this regard, namely pro-environmental values and beliefs. Before analyzing our model, we want to highlight some challenges that a social planner might face when she tries to improve the accuracy of the beliefs or increase pro-environmental values in the population. I won't read all those details, but you can go back and read them. Obviously, behavioral change is a very complicated challenge, and people also think they are pro-environmental. So let's say you buy a hybrid car, but then you may be eating a lot of meat, not worrying about a lot of other things you are doing, and so on. So one action bias, confirmation bias, negativity bias, and free ridership, all kinds of things come into play. So the game tree looks like this. Obviously, I haven't explained anything, but you can see nature here, and you are uh, exploiting things for manufacturing, which is going through other manufacturers, let's say raw material going into finished products, reaching consumers, and then consumers are having these end of cycle kind of behavior, or resale of a car or computer, TV, recycling of solar panels, various things. So you can see all these things interacting with each other. I won't go into the detail, but it's a very nice detailed model. The main points I wanted to carry was that Green preferences actually may lead to greenwashing, sustaining the greenwashing, because you keep on blindly buying things that you have been told are green, environmentally friendly, but the corporations, manufacturers are not being very honest, right? Altogether, reliable monitoring can have two countervailing effects. On the one hand, if reliable monitoring is increasingly common, and if the prior beliefs of consumers reflect this, then G decreases, which is one of the parameters. Declines in G increase the scope for an equilibrium in which environmentally minded consumers tolerate the risk of greenwashing. So you are now not paying attention. In this sense, reliable monitoring comprises the ability of green consumers to exert pressure on the manufacturer by tracking greenwashing and deciding what is your tolerance. On the other hand, in a greenwashing equilibrium, green consumers believe and accept that greenwashing occurs with probability G. If this belief is accurate, say because it rests on the accurate reporting about greenwashing among the firms, or because the consumer learns this information from other well-informed consumers, then actual rate of fraudulent signaling in equilibrium is also G. In other words, there is actual greenwashing happening, and there are a lot of manufacturers, let's say, that are honest. So you have an idea of what is the fraction, percentage of greenwashing, and what is your tolerance. If you say, I'm buying N number of things, and 10% of them are likely to be facing greenwashing, you might say, I won't bother with it. But there may be some consumers who do the homework and say, it's not 10, it's 20%, or 10% is okay, so on and so forth. Credibility, legitimacy, and salience of the messenger that you trust always matters, right? So, in this sense, increasingly reliable monitoring decreases G and supports the ability of green consumers to exert pressure on the manufacturer to produce sustainably. Importantly, our analysis reveals that the worst outcome of all is when consumers overestimate the reliability of monitoring of manufacturers. So the policing of the manufacturers itself has to be honest. Manufacturers cannot bribe the police and get away with more greenwashing. Okay, such an outcome is likely to support an equilibrium with greenwashing, but the actual rate of greenwashing would be much higher than environmentally conscious consumers realize. So we are assuming that greenwashing is going to happen like free ridership always happens. This is an especially interesting possibility as manufacturers start exploiting unreliable monitoring because they know that the police are not careful in some ways. Do changes in consumer beliefs reflect this appropriately? Do consumers underestimate reliability, overestimate reliability, or get it just right? As unreliable monitoring proliferates, consumers may decide that all monitoring is untrustworthy. So there's a threshold which, if you cross, then the trust collapses. Alternatively, consumers may simply hope for the best and they don't have time to worry about it. Willpower is a limited resource. You might start in the morning with all the good intentions, but after monitoring a few things for greenwashing, by the time evening comes and you're driving home to just cook and eat or feed the children, you have forgotten about greenwashing. Crucially, however, a social planner could intervene and support the dissemination of accurate beliefs among consumers, i.e., beliefs that better reflect the true reliability of monitoring systems. So here you are saying again that the social planner is an honest agent, an honest broker. Finally, in broad terms, the upshot of our model is the following. Preferences for sustainability can differ between manufacturer and consumer. And they do, increasingly green preferences among consumers open the door for ever more widely to greenwashing as a likely outcome because manufacturers begin to see that consumers are buying more and more things with this certification of some sort. Surprisingly, this is even true in extreme cases when consumers know with certainty whether or not monitoring is reliable. So you may just be washing off your guilt saying, I'm buying things that are certified to be green. Should a social planner promote the cultural evolution of preferences for sustainability among manufacturers, consumers, or both? Our analysis suggests that the information structure, competition among manufacturers, the actual distribution of reliable and unreliable monitoring, and consumer beliefs about reliability might all be important. So how these complex interactions play out and what the equilibrium will be is hard to predict, right? These factors determine whether the cultural evolution of pro-environmental values actually translates into improved sustainability. So everybody has to play together. Manufacturers have to do it for actually being sustainable and not just getting past the certification and monitoring. The cultural evolution of pro-environmental values and beliefs involves complex interrelationships that we are only now beginning to uncover. We have highlighted some of the challenges posed by the spread of false beliefs and the mechanisms that prevent large-scale behavior change based on pro-environmental norms. Our simple model illustrates what those risks imply for the sustainability of production and consumption in certain contexts. For a rapid transition to a sustainable future, it is crucial that we accelerate our research on possible ways to address these challenges. So this is slightly different, saying we may not have evolved to do collective climate action at global scales, but sustainability at global scales by collective actions. But maybe there are possibilities, leverages, incentivizing, you know, revolutions in transitions in behavior and cultural preferences to actually make sustainability possible. Well, we can always be optimistic, but as I said before, I think finding solutions is important and solutions have to be manufactured. Consumers have to be sold things that are sustainable, and this is where this consumer preference, greenwashing, manufacturers' tendency to focus on profit. And when you say manufacturers, they're not some person, right? That's a corporation. Corporations are owned by people. Sometimes you have a big retirement account and you don't even know where that investment is happening in your investment account because you have some kind of a mutual fund or a group retirement fund is being run by somebody who's very motivated to bring you the highest returns on your investment. So it's a very complicated issue, as you can imagine. Okay, so let's leave this here, but it's a nice paper. You can go back and read in details if you want to follow up.